What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, February 26, 2018, getting into the start of a brand new week, almost to the end of the month here. And our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone. And I'm going to break with my normal pattern of starting in on the political news and so forth. I have a couple of things I want to share with you right up front here. And the first is, I'm a huge fan of HBO documentaries. I'm constantly referring to hacking democracy when we talk about the issue of widespread election fraud in this country. But over this last weekend, I saw another one that I want to give a shout out to, and it's called Atomic Homefront. And this is a documentary that's been made about that terrible situation northwest of St. Louis, Missouri, in the communities of Bridgeton and the housing developments along Coldwater Creek. And just to give it to you in brief, during the creation of the atomic bombs, there was a company in St. Louis that was contracted to do the first round of uranium purification, to go from the yellow cake uranium oxide to the actual metallic form uranium. And along the way, they generated thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of highly radioactive waste product, which has been trucked to this landfill. And they've covered it over with plastic. It's a Superfund site, but nothing's being done about it. And meanwhile, the contamination has leaked out of these areas, and it's spreading again down Coldwater Creek. And what's really amazing is just all these people who come down with these very exotic, rare cancers, and how they're just being stonewalled by all levels of government, and obviously the company that maintains the landfill as well. And we've already contacted their public relations company. We're going to try and get one of the filmmakers here. But this is showing on the schedule a few more times on HBO, or if you have HBO on demand, you can go watch it, and you really do need to see that. Now, another shout out I want to do, we finally got a resolution on the issue of our car. It was declared a total loss. And I figured we were probably going to get about $1.50 from it, but we were pleasantly surprised we're getting a little bit more than that. And I just want to do a shout out to State Farm, which has just handled this whole situation beautifully. You know me, when I'm find bad products or bad service, I'm the first one to complain. So when I see somebody who's doing a good job, I have to mention it. So State Farm really did a good job. We're going to be staying with them with the new car, and they really were wonderful about the whole thing here, especially dealing with that problem of the car getting effectively stolen twice here. And finally, there's a little consumer warning. I'm not going to name the specific company involved, but this has happened to Claire twice, and it happened to me once, where you sign up for some online shopping channel, and you get really good prices on what's going on. And what you don't realize is that very often you agree to a membership fee. And this is why you got to check those credit card statements every month and look for anything that seems suspicious, because we found out that this company had been hitting the credit card every month for about $40 for the membership fee. And this is a website that Claire only bought a few things from here. So we've cleared it up. The company involved has canceled the subscription, and they've refunded most of the money. But it's something you got to look out for, because it's becoming more and more common practice. And absolutely, there was nothing prominently displayed about a membership fee when Claire was signing up for this. I got suckered for the same thing for Stamps.com. You've probably seen that. That one, I said, yeah, I'll use the service and I'll pay for the postage and everything. Didn't realize, buried in the fine print, there's a monthly membership fee here. Okay, so I wanted to get those out of the way here because they've been weighing on me over the whole weekend. That documentary, Atomic Homefront, I can't stop thinking about it, and just how the entire society, system of government, EPA, has utterly failed these people, many of whom moved into these homes not knowing they were over radioactive waste. And now, because the story's gotten on out, real estate values have plummeted, and these people literally cannot afford to move anywhere else because they're not going to get any money selling their current home, which means they don't have the money to get into a new home further away. And they've been asking for a complete removal of the waste, and all they get is it's being managed, it's being monitored. Our scientists are saying it's perfectly safe, and meanwhile there's just people dying of cancer all over the place. Again, that is atomic home front. Now, let's get on down to Parkland in Florida. There have been some new developments related to that shooting. And last Friday it was reported that Broward County Sheriff's Deputy Scott Peterson, who served as the armed school resource officer, did not enter the school while the shooting occurred. But it turns out Peterson wasn't the only one. There were 3 other Broward County Sheriff's deputies, 4 in all, who remained outside the school, basically taking cover behind their vehicles. This is being reported by CNN. This is not a fringe conspiracy story. And interestingly enough, the Coral Springs police officers who arrived at the school were very surprised that the sheriff's deputies did not accompany them as they entered the school. This is also reported by CNN. We're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So the sheriff of Broward County, Scott Israel, is out there saying, well, if the deputies didn't have the heart to go in, that's not my responsibility. So already everybody's playing the blame-shifting regatta here. Now, over at BuzzFeed, they have discovered 22 more police calls to the Cruz home than the Broward sheriff admitted to. He never disclosed them. In fact, he was on TV being interviewed and said, well, there were only 20-something of these incidents, and even the person that was interviewing said, no, there were a lot more than that. Right now, it looks like the total is at least 45 times the police were called to the Cruz home over his acts of violence. 45 times. Now, again, Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel is out there trying to save his reputation. There have already been calls for his resignation, and he insists he's an amazing leader, despite failing to stop this shooting from happening. So the bovine excrement is piling up high and wide around this. Here's where it gets even more interesting. There is now a report that has come on out that the Broward deputy sheriffs, the coward cops, refused to let the paramedics go inside the school to help the wounded. Now, that's not normal protocol. The normal protocol for these mass casualty events is you go in immediately. You get to the victims. You save their lives. You just can't leave them lying there bleeding out. And in point of fact, these first responders are out there saying they were effectively told to stand down, and probably people died because of that. Over at InfoWars, they interviewed one of the first responders. They kept him anonymous, fear reprisal, basically saying he was told to stand down. And he's very angry because he's saying some of those people who died could have been saved with emergency medical treatment. And again, the normal protocol for a mass casualty event is those paramedics, they get in there. And they were kept out. So there's something really wrong with this. Now, Florida Governor Rick Scott has called for the FBI director to resign while ignoring the obvious failings of the Broward County Sheriff's Department. So there's blame enough to go around for everybody, because even the FBI is saying, yeah, we kind of missed this. We were too busy trying to railroad Trump that we couldn't actually go on out and save these kids' lives. But more and more people are thinking this is another classic gun grabber false flag, because it fits the same pattern. An active shooter drill just before or right at the same time as the actual shooting, eyewitness reports of multiple shooters, predated news reports that show up on the web, and the decision to tear down the building where it happened immediately, all the better to erase any and all evidence that might point to the shooting being a false flag operation. All the pieces are there. Now, we're still getting reports from other people coming on out who were invited to that CNN town hall last Wednesday, and they're all saying the same thing. They were not allowed to ask the questions they wanted to ask. They wanted to talk about armed security guards and concealed carry and the teachers, and CNN provided them the script and said, you will do this. And of course, CNN has issued a report saying, we never script our news, we never have, and we never will. Now, here's where it gets interesting. One of the teachers in the school has now gone public. There's a video that's popping up all over the web, then it gets taken down. We've got a link to it at whatreallyhappened.com because people just keep putting it up here. And this teacher says she saw the actual shooter. And he was wearing a helmet and a face mask. He had full body armor, and she did not recognize the style gun that he was carrying. But he was just spraying bullets down the hallway. Now, there was that one student who said she was talking to Nicholas Cruz. She never mentioned him being dressed in full SWAT gear. In fact, nobody actually saw Nicholas Cruz wearing that kind of outfit. Or for that matter, there are no eyewitnesses that say he shot anybody. So the reasons for looking closely at this are starting to pile on up. First of all, you have the missing surveillance video. You had that ridiculous story about a 27-minute delay on the video system. But the video system installed at that school, it's a wealthy neighborhood, the school's got a lot of money, and it monitors all exterior areas of the campus as well as the interior corridors. And the video is not being released, and they're saying it may never be released. It's just too shocking. You know, we have to protect your sensitive eyes and ears. Just take our word about what happened on it. There's the issue of the scripted lines. There is the obvious preparation that the gun grabbers had to mobilize and exploit these Stoneman Douglas High School students. Apparently, former National Committee Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz advised key Stoneman students in organizing the Never Again movement and arranging protests, including the lobbying trip to Washington, D.C., to Tallahassee to meet with the Florida legislators. Then you have the issue about the experts, people with military training and school administrators saying they question various troubling elements of this whole episode. John Bushell, a militarily trained weapons expert, security expert, and school administrator based in Florida, tweeted at length about how Parkland differed greatly from his own experiences defending his school during an active shooter event. Then we have the issue, again, reports of multiple shooters, including the teacher who saw one in SWAT gear, the speed with which they're moving to demolish the crime scene, the fact that normal established protocols for law enforcement and mass casualty events were simply abandoned. And of course, this fistfight to establish and enforce the official narrative in the face of mounting questions and criticisms. And right now, we're seeing a lot of censorship on the corporate media. And I'm talking about Google, YouTube. Apparently, YouTube is now threatening to shut down Alex Jones' channels over the fact that he posted a tape showing David Hogg struggling with his memorized lines and being coached by the camera crew. Then there's the involvement of the FBI. Technically, the FBI doesn't have jurisdiction in these cases. The crime did not occur on federal property. The crime did not cross state lines. But anytime the FBI shows up, that's another one of those red flags. Something underhanded is going on. And then finally, there is the issue of what role these psychiatric medications played. And they're trying to protect that as well because pharmaceuticals are big business and big business makes big money. They're very generous donors to congressional campaigns. So we'll just scapegoat the guns. Tell everybody those drugs are absolutely wonderful. Remember the other day we were reporting there are 1 million children under the age of 6 in this country that are already on these medications. Now everybody's running around saying, oh, this was the deadliest mass shooting, school attack. Actually, the deadliest school attack in the U.S. killed 44 people, and it wasn't done with a gun. There was a guy at the school. He was working there as an electrician, and apparently raises in taxes had led him to lose his home. And so he wired the building with explosives and just blew it up. Not a very good thing to do. But it's a reminder, taking away the guns will not discourage people of evil intent. They'll figure out something else that achieves whatever their objective happens to be. Now, Twitter and YouTube are now scrubbing all content and banning all users who question the official narrative on the Florida school shooting. And I've noticed on my YouTube channel for this show, some of those videos have already disappeared, and probably this one will be sent off to the bit bucket as well, because, again, I'm questioning the official narrative here. And as I mentioned before, InfoWars has received a YouTube termination warning over that crisis actor video. So they're clearly panicked that we're not buying the story. And they should have learned in the aftermath of Mandalay Bay that we just don't accept the official story any longer. We're looking for ourselves. We're deciding for ourselves. Now, something to remember, of course, is that 98% of all mass shootings target gun-free zones that were created by the liberals. Because somebody who wants to just go and have a real-life first-person shooting experience, they're going to go to the gun-free zones because they know nobody will be there that can fire back. And it's ludicrous. They're trying to blame the NRA, which, by the way, is a strong supporter of teaching gun safety and the proper use of firearms. And realize that these gun-free zones were a ridiculous idea to begin with. And apparently, Representative Thomas Massey agrees. He's introduced House Resolution 34 to repeal the 1990 Gun-Free School Zone Act. And I think that's a good idea. We need to tear down all those gun-free zone signs and replace them with signs saying, "Dear perpetrator, 1/3 of the people here are carrying concealed. You guess which ones." And again, the intent is not to get a massive shootout going, but to discourage the perpetrator, to give them a reason to maybe go someplace else, do something different, go to a movie, go surfing or something. And to nobody's surprise, gun sales in Florida are skyrocketing. Every time the gun grabbers try one of these, everybody arms on up. They're out there buying guns like crazy. Here's where it gets a little bit sick. This is over at governmentslaves.info. Apparently, police are confiscating people's firearms under very flimsy excuses. Oh, you might be dangerous. Your family thinks you're dangerous. And they're taking the firearms they've seized from individuals, and they're reselling them to make money for the police departments, and some of these guns go on to be used in other crimes. This is from the Associated Press. In the state of Washington alone, more than a dozen of the guns sold by law enforcement since 2010 ended up in new crimes. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And I'll tell you how out of control the hysteria is. Apparently, at Oberlin High School in Louisiana, some students were in a math class, and a student was at the blackboard solving a math problem, and he drew the symbol for a square root. And apparently one of the other students said, "Oh, that looks an awful lot like a gun," and apparently sparked a police investigation. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. And people are sending me all these videos. There's a video war going on. And people are starting to use platforms that are not being subject, at least at this point, to censorship. So a video I just now put up at whatreallyhappened.com are the students who are basically confirming there was an active shooter drill going on at that school, at the same time the actual shooting happened. So I'm just now putting another one up that's on YouTube, and it's basically the students who are saying that there were definitely multiple shooters. So let's get it up there and see how long it is before YouTube yanks that one down as well. Now, unfortunately, a federal appeals court in Maryland has made a very questionable decision, which resulted in one of the appeal judges issuing a strongly worded dissent. Maryland's ban on 45 kinds of assault weapons and its 10-round limit on gun magazines were upheld Tuesday by a federal appeals court, and Judge William Traxler issued a dissent saying that by concluding the Second Amendment doesn't apply to these weapons, Traxler wrote, the majority has gone to greater lengths than any other court to eviscerate the constitutionally guaranteed right to keep and bear arms. And he said basically the court did not apply a strict enough review on the constitutionality of the law. And he basically went back and he said, for law-abiding citizens who, for whatever reason, chooses to protect his home with a semi-automatic rifle instead of a semi-automatic handgun, accuracy being an obvious reason, Maryland's law clearly imposes a significant burden on the exercise of the right to defend oneself in one's home. Now, I would like that this goes all the way to the Supreme Court, because in point of fact, the Supreme Court has already ruled in United States versus Miller that the Second Amendment reserves to the American people the same kind of weapons carried by the uniformed military. And the way that came about was Miller had been arrested with a sawed-off shotgun, and he insisted the Second Amendment covered that. And the Supreme Court said no, the Second Amendment, because it talks about militias and the security of a free state, they're talking about military weapons, which includes assault rifles, obviously. So these liberal gun grabbers, they're trying to change the law from the bench is what's going on. All right, let's take a phone call from Ed in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just got a email from Gun Owners of America. I think they're a little bit more reliable than the NRA. And apparently, the Senate has a couple bills which will circumvent, the two-thirds majority of the states for legal acts to be considered, like, let's say, the 2018 Gun Repeal Act. And it kind of worries me, considering most of our politicians are either blackmailed or nothing more than prostitutes who just do the bidding of corporations. I'm really concerned about my Second Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem they represent me. Unfortunately, my senator is Marco Rubio, so I expect nothing good ever to come from that man. And they're talking about banning bumper stocks, I believe. I've never used them before, but when it goes into detail, it could also go into 30-round mags. It can go into certain triggers. It can go into 100 different pieces of parts you can place to a gun, not to make it fire, but, just the ability for more than 5 or 10 rounds as you have in New Jersey or New York. Mm-hmm. I mean, here in Florida, you could have 30, 60-round mags, and these mass shootings seem like they happen every year or two, and within days, legislation's already there to ban certain type of weapons or to ban certain types of magazines.
Yeah, the bills are already to go. They've already been written in secrecy, and then they come on out and say, we have to introduce this legislation. It's a very well-planned operation, and they're going to keep on doing it. They're going to keep on killing kids for this political point.
Yet they don't care about the crime rate of black-on-black violence. And Chicago on, let's say, 4th of July or New Year's Eve, where you might have 50, 60 people killed in one day. That doesn't matter. But
well,
what does matter is these false flag attacks that happen in, public schools. I mean, it tugs on the American heartstring.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Oh my God,
that's why they target the children. That's why they're hitting the children, because they're trying to elicit an emotional response of shock and horror so that people won't step back and say, wait a minute, something else is going on here.
Now, one of the background checks that they're trying to impose is, if you're on if you have Alzheimer's, which you shouldn't have a gun anyway, but it goes on to PTSD, ADHD, postpartum depression, or OCD, or a guardian process their check. Now, I think eventually they're not going to just yank the guns away. If anything, they'll do, you'll go in front of a panel, maybe 3 to 5 psychiatrists that are paid by the state, and they'll make a decision whether or not you're mentally capable of owning a firearm. That's what we'll probably start with. My question is, who watches the watchers? Who actually makes sure that these, if it ever happens, these panels be ever decided?
We've descended to the level of the Soviet Union, and your concerns are very valid. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take another commercial break.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take another phone call. Michael in San Jose. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I'd like to suggest 3 very important people to be guests on your future shows. To begin with, Miss Deborah Tavares of StopTheCrime.net. That's StopTheCrime.net. Number 2, Dr. Russell Blaylock and Mr. Jamie Lee from aplaintruth.info. Very important people at this time, and I think you'll be enlightened in the audience if you would bring them on the show, particularly Deborah Tavares of StopTheCrime.net.
Okay, I'll take a look into it.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, I'm getting all these emails where people have saved all these videos that are being flushed out of YouTube, and they're putting them up on their own websites, and so the information is out there, and there's no way to get it back. Somebody just sent me a photograph supposedly taken at the scene of the school showing 3 men in SWAT-style gear apparently getting into a truck right after the shooting happened. I'm going to have to get some provenance on that before I publish it. But yeah, this one's falling apart faster than the Mandalay Bay false flag. All right, let's get into some politics and corruption, because there's certainly enough of it to go around. There's enough of it here. And Adam Schiff finally released the Democratic FISA memo. It was meant to counteract the Republican one and make it look like the FBI are a swell bunch of Joes. They're great dancers, and they keep their shoes polished, and you really should back off on them. But it actually backfired, because the Democrats' memo confirms the FBI and the DOJ never disclosed that the Trump dossier shown to the FISA court was funded by Hillary and friends. And that's really what the stink is all about here. Now, the Republicans have already come out with their own document refuting point by point the Democratic memo. They almost don't need to do that. Very thoughtful article over in the National Review saying the Schiff memo harms Democrats much more than it helps them. They've got nothing to work with. It was all a hoax. It was all corruption. All right, let's take a couple more phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. New Jersey's got a 15-round magazine maximum.
Yes.
For the rifles. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how come I can't own a TOW and a Stinger missile? Since they're giving them to, jihadists, they don't have a problem with them having them. How come I can't have a Stinger or TOW missile system? What am I, untrustworthy American citizen?
The Miller decision didn't quite go that far. They basically talked about the regular kit weapons that soldiers would have, which is rifle, a knife, and so forth and so on. And that's what the Miller decision basically came down to. Now, Miller lost his case. He did go to jail for the sawed-off shotgun. But it did set a precedent that the Second Amendment is not about shooting. It is not about hunting. It was about military-style weapons for use in a military situation to protect the sovereignty of a free state from an encroaching central government. And that's what it's there about. And the Founding Fathers intended that the law-abiding citizens of the militia, the unorganized militia, would have weapons equal to those in the hands of the government itself.
Well, you know why I brought that up, Mike? Because if you give a jihadi a Stinger missile, he can shoot down a passenger plane. Now, that doesn't seem to faze the military-industrial complex or our politicians. You know, John McCain and Rubio and all them were for giving the weapons to the moderate rebel head choppers, right? What happens if they use those weapons against a passenger plane? Doesn't seem they don't mind if they kill civilians over here, over there,
they'll
anywhere.
Just pump it for all the propaganda value that's worth. I'm more concerned about this government that wants to take away military-style weapons from the law-abiding people of the United States of America, was sending them down to Mexican drug gangs. And the drug wars down in Mexico have spun out of control. A lot of people have been killed. Some of those guns have made it back into the United States of America, and there was a big stink where a border guard was gunned down with one of these weapons that were supplied to the Mexican cartels by the U.S. Fast and Furious program.
And you don't think they would know that would happen? You know, they don't care.
They don't
Look at Libya. That was Fast and Furious too, Mike.
Yep.
Right? I mean, they were, you know, moving weapons out of the warehouse. You know, that wasn't even a real embassy, I believe, right? Wasn't there a warehouse adjacent to that complex that had all the weapons stored in there?
Yeah, it was actually a consulate. It was actually a consulate, not an embassy. And you're right. That was the hub for the smuggling operation to smuggle weapons out of Libya and into the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria.
Mike, I know somebody called, this was months ago, about how the police were a private group that is basically paid by a lot of, I don't know all, but some of the cities. It's a private groups, like the police. Is that how that works? Private entities?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. Could you rephrase that?
I remember somebody called like a while ago about how the police are not part of like the government or the state government or even the town government. Are they like leased out in some of these towns? Are they like
yes,
private security contracts?
There are some private police forces where the city or county just contracts with them to say, you take care of it all. And but these police are supposedly constrained by the same laws as the regular institutional police.
But aren't they just there to protect and serve the institutions that govern us? You know, that's what I mean.
More and more, it seems like it. I mean, here in Hawaii, there's been a rather interesting transition over the last few years where the police departments are shutting down the standalone police departments, and they're basically leasing space inside the shopping malls. We've got 2 shopping malls close to us where the police are just right on in there. So they're obviously there to protect the merchandise rather than the people.
And I know Al called on Friday. I have to agree with him that, you know, obviously we're much more of a violent culture in this country than Canada has a lower crime rate, obviously, because it's a population thing. But I was reading an article, this was from the end of 2016, on how they had violent crime was a 12-year high over there. And I'm looking back. Now, Mike, I look at Chicago and Detroit and all these rundown areas. Economics is definitely the number one issue for crime. Like, that's it.
Yeah, nobody turns to crime. You know, most people don't want to be criminals. Most people turn to crime only because they have no other way to feed their families here. And you find these situations in these democratically run cities where the liberal agenda has just run roughshod over people's standard of living. And it gets to be a problem. But I want to stress there is another factor, and that is these prescription antidepressants. Now, 1/4 of the American population are on these, and police actually have them higher per capita than that. There was a study that was done down in Florida, and we know what these medications can do. They can absolutely wreck your impulse control. So you're standing there on a street corner in Chicago, you've got your SSRIs, coursing through your brain. Somebody just ticks you up, and you get an impulse to just pull the gun and pull the trigger. There's nothing that's going to stop you from doing it.
Yeah, because, you know what? I don't watch TV, Mike, because it seems like every other commercial, 2 in a row they'll have, 3 in a row of just drug commercials.
Yes.
You know, with the side effects talking real fast, like the guy from Micro Machines commercials. Remember?
Yes.
Like, blah, 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 blah. Like they try. Like the side effects are like a lot worse than just deal with the problem. Not for everybody, but for the majority.
They are. And the U.S. is one of the few countries on earth that allow prescription medicines to be advertised in the media. And we should cut it on out because they're trying to use consumer pressure to basically overrule the doctor's good judgment. And then, of course, there's the other issue that doctors are financially incentivized by the pharmaceutical corporations to push certain medicines and certain treatments. It's all about the money. It's the medical industrial complex.
It's just sad how American people just, take a pill for this, take a pill for that, and they see the same commercials, though, like, it just, they don't see it the same way I do, like, it doesn't click. I'm like, may cause intestinal bleeding. Well, then you don't take the pill. If it's going to cause you something like that, stay away from that pill, try something else, but I mean.
I saw a commercial, I forget the exact medication that was being advertised because generally I don't pay attention to them, but in the side effects spiel at the end, and you're right, they talk very fast, they're legally mandated to put it out there, but they want to put it in a way that people don't pay attention to, and apparently it does work. And they're talking about how this medicine could actually lead to death.
I'll take a dozen of them. And people will take them nilly-willy. It's a shame. Yeah, the doctors get kickbacks, and
yes.
Like they got when you go to the doctor's office, they got all the advertisements stickered everywhere. Like what a joke, Mike. This whole society, like this society's finished. As far as I'm concerned, it's finished.
Yeah.
It's just decadent, man. And there's nothing we can do, Mike, to stop it.
Well,
we can't stop it, Mike.
No, my advice continues to be. Just grin and bear it and sit back because this government, this economy are tearing themselves apart. And we're going to get a fresh restart the way the Russian republics did, and we get some common sense laws in there, term limits, strict limits on campaign contributions, because basically without those limits on campaign contributions, the politicians are going to be for sale to the highest bidder. That Capitol building is a one-stop shopping mall for all the corrupting influences in our society.
And tar and feathers, Mike. Tar and feathers that people have done this to us.
Time to go long on tar and feathers. I agree with you on that one. Okay.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, Dustin, thanks a lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Kathleen in Paris. Kathleen, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Michael. A few things. Well, you changed over to pharmaceutical drugs, and so I just wanted to mention that, I'm an American. I live in Paris, but when I was in the States in 2007, I had forgotten about publicity for pharmaceuticals on television, and it's just really shocking. I don't know that maybe there's one other country in the world that allows that.
I think there are two others.
Pretty ridiculous.
I think there are two others. I can't recall them off the top of my head. But it shouldn't be allowed to happen because you're trying to use mass media advertising to overrule and overwhelm the doctor's best judgment. And you got to cut out the incentives on the back end here.
Well, what I really called about was, I'm going to say, before I get to YouTube, about the boy who's the shooter. When they arrested him, he was dressed in school garb, like a teenage kid.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't dressed in SWAT gear. Of course, he could have taken it off, but the eyewitness said that the shooter was dressed in SWAT gear, and anyway. So
well, the one student who claimed that she was talking to Nicholas when the firing began. I didn't mention that he was dressed up in a SWAT outfit. The Uber driver doesn't mention it. And that's a lot of heavy equipment you got to drag around here. It's not something that a small compact car, you're going to have the room to do it.
But we actually saw what he was wearing when he was arrested.
Yes.
And his behavior, supposedly after doing this thing, to go down to the mall and go into fast food places. Anyway. I wanted to talk about YouTube. I think they have shot themselves in both feet.
Yes.
I'm an English teacher. So I think we're going to be fleeing away from YouTube even faster now. Some of the people I listen to, the channels, like if one gets shut down, the other one will have him on as a guest. And I'm learning about other channels and other sites that I didn't even know about that are telling the truth. And I think that YouTube is self-destructing.
Yeah, they are. The entire corporate media is self-destructing. We're going to have a couple of articles about that a little further into the show.
Uh-huh. So two of the ones that are abandoning, and they tell you where they're switching to. For example, DTube and Steemit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are good ones. Vimeo, at this point, Vimeo seems to not have the censorship thing going for it yet. But, the government can go to all these companies and say, you will now enforce our ban or block list, or we'll find a way to shut you down. We've reached that stage of heavy-handed behavior. I mean, the FBI will probably sending out all these so-called national security letters that say, you will do this, what we ask you to do, and you can't tell anybody that we came here and ordered you to do it. All of which is unconstitutional. There is nothing in the Constitution that authorizes the FBI to behave like the Gestapo.
Well, that's amazing. I remember when Obama, I didn't even know what a national security letter was, but Obama was really going on about how bad they were. I think when he was either a senator or a candidate. But then, of course, after he became president, well, then that was quite a useful tool.
Yeah, it was. Well, he was going on and on about it because there had been one of the recipients of these letters who'd gone public, alleging that their particular letter constituted prior restraint and a violation of the First Amendment. And so that really took off on the independent media and was all over the net, all over the internet, all over the blogs, and that's why Obama addressed that issue.
Yeah, but when he was a candidate, he said they were terrible.
Well, we've had a hard lesson this last year. What the candidate says on the campaign trail is rather meaningless. I'm still waiting for Trump to throw Hillary Clinton in prison, and I'm very upset over this escalation of all the wars, especially since I live right next door to a first strike target. So I'm greatly disappointed. He's still better than Hillary would have been, but marginally. Okay.
I have one more thing to say.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to have to hold you. I'm going to have to hold you through the commercial break. So don't hang up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with Kathleen in Paris. And Kathleen, you said you had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
Yes. A week ago or so, in the comments of Ron Gibson's channel, some of the listeners were talking about doing a crowdfunding to have a new car for the Riveros.
Oh, and, my goodness. I was completely unaware of that. Yeah.
Well, and so a lot of people thought that was a good idea. Why don't we do that? But it seems like they didn't know how. And myself, I tried to search on how to do that and set it up, and I didn't know how. And I've had the idea that it could be more financially efficient to just everybody that would have contributed
okay,
to send a
continue.
Check,
yeah.
To send a check, everybody that would have signed up if there was a crowdfunding for the car for the Riveros, if you would have sent $10, $5, whatever, just send a check made out to Michael Rivero at the address on the website and earmark it for the new car.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I'm actually a little embarrassed. I mean, Claire and we're going to be car shopping this weekend because we're running out of the rental. We had saved up a little bit of money, so we're going to be able to get the car. And I hate asking people for money because I know everybody is in serious financial trouble.
I know, and I knew you wouldn't like me to say it if I asked you. So I just did it, and so everybody, if you would have contributed, send a small check to the address on the website, earmarked for the car.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for that. All
Thank
right.
you.
We're going to let you go.
Yeah.
And just got another article here. Apparently, yet another teacher from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, teacher Ernest Rospierski, told the Associated Press he had been told there was an active shooter drill scheduled for that day that would be using blank ammunition. So this one is definitely falling apart. All right, getting on back to the domestic politics. With the issuance of the Democrats' FISA memo and the fact that it has done a major faceplant, all of a sudden, Russiagate is becoming a lot more interesting because the memo basically says that the alleged and still unproven Russian activity did not actually change the results of the 2016 presidential election, or that any actual votes were altered or tampered with by Russia. Now, they should be looking at votes that are tampered with by domestic politicians here. So what they've got is a little bit of smoke and no fire, and it's swinging the focus back onto Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. Now, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and we have a caller waiting on the line. Frank in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha. Thanks for taking my call, Mike. I have to give credit where credit's due. I was listening yesterday to the Sunday broadcast of Alex Jones, and about 50 minutes into his show, first hour, and one of the RBN hosts played this last night on his show too, and he thought it was kind of inexplicable as well. Alex Jones tries to pass off this shooting, this Broward County, Florida school shooting, as a jihadi operation, and the sheriff is a secret jihadi, is a follower of Islam. And he said all this with a straight face, and obviously this is like a bold-faced attempt at deflection away from any involvement of Israel or, anyone out of the Jewish community. I mean, everyone knows, that even knows anything.
Frank, pardon me for interrupting here. I don't want to go any further with this until I've seen the video for myself, because we know right now that there is a lot of attempt.
I heard it myself.
I want to hear it myself. I want to hear it myself because obviously right now the corporate media is on the warpath against us, and they're trying to create divisions. And I want to be really careful because once before somebody called into the show and claimed that one of the other hosts had said something nasty, and it turned out it was a complete hoax. So I need to hear that tape before we go any further on this subject, okay? If you'll email me the URL.
Just let us know. I'm not on the internet, but just let us know. It's about 50 minutes into the first hour. Go to the GCN archives or whatever, people. It's also on YouTube. So.
Okay, well, thanks an awful lot. I'll hunt that down. All right. Bye-bye. We have to be very careful. We have to be very, very careful. There's a lot of rumor mongering out there intended to harm the independent media community. And I'm not saying that Alex didn't say it. I just need to hear it for myself before we go any further with that. Now, article coming out of Information Clearinghouse is asking, when will Congress investigate all interference in our elections? By now you've noticed it's strictly a Russia did it narrative. We know other countries, especially Israel, routinely try and influence our elections. And of course, the other side of it is the United States has tampered with and tinkered with other people's elections going back at least as far as World War II. Now, what's really coming out of the development is that apparently this so-called Internet Research Agency, they're trying to claim it's a Russian government operation, but apparently the organization's employees behave like amateurs. Their English is actually very poor, and it doesn't really look like it's a government-run operation. It looks like somebody threw it together to say, here's the next step to Russian involvement. It could have been completely set up by Hillary and her people. Get some Russian computer people, could put them into an office, call it the Internet Research Agency, and use that to lay that false trail back to Russia. We have another scandal that needs to be brought back into the light here, and that's Uranium-1. Now, as you know, there is an informant, an FBI informant, William Campbell, and according to the lawyer, Campbell has told congressional committees that the Russians openly bragged that the Clintons' influence in the Obama administration would ensure Committee of Foreign Investments in the United States approval for the Uranium-1 deal. And obviously, that was right. That did happen. Now, before CFIUS, on which Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sat, approved the Uranium-1 deal, 9 investors in Uranium-1 gave the Clinton Foundation a combined total of $145 million. That's very obviously pay for play. Why is that still not being investigated? Now, we may be about to see a changing of the guard in November because out in California, the Democrats are not endorsing Dianne Feinstein for re-election. They had their state convention ended yesterday, and apparently the California State Party is looking at current State Senate President Pro Tem Kevin DeLeon to take over her seat. And a lot of people are wondering what's going on with Maxine Waters. She was out there railing on Trump and mispronouncing Vladimir Putin's name twice. Apparently there's some billboards going on up just saying she's rotten to the core. So we might see a seismic shift in Congress here. Now, as you know, following the revelations about skullduggery during the 2016 election, a huge group of Bernie Sanders supporters got together and sued the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, alleging fraud in that they were donating to support Bernie Sanders at the same time the DNC was sabotaging him and throwing the money to Hillary Clinton. And yeah, it was fraud. What they were doing was illegal. Now the lawyers for the DNC have issued a petition to the court, and this one takes the cake. The lawyers for the DNC, the lawyers for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, are now arguing that rigging the primary election is protected by the First Amendment. What a load of nonsense that is. The First Amendment exists to protect the truth, not to protect lies and fraud. I remember a few years ago, politicians were saying that it was okay to lie on the campaign trail, and that was protected speech under the First Amendment. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, over at CNN, their boss, Jeff Zucker, is calling on regulators to probe Google and Facebook and saying that the government needs to pay closer attention to the power wielded by Google and Facebook as news providers try and adapt to the changing digital landscape. Now, he's hemming and hawing about it. Fox News called for open censorship of the independent media, and they were a little bit more upfront about it. They say it's all about the revenues. They're losing audience to the independent media, and they want it back, and they think that if they can find a way to shut down the independent media, the audience is going to come back to them. Well, they might, but they're not going to be the same audience they had before. They're going to be skeptical. They're going to be distrusting of what's presented as news and certainly what's presented in those commercials. Now let's talk about what's going on in the war zones. There's a lot going on out there, and it's not getting reported at all. Story coming out of Global Research up in Canada, and they're saying that top experts on the Middle East are warning that this war in Syria may produce World War III. And they basically go on back to the fact that Qatar wanted to build a gas pipeline to the Mediterranean. and that this somehow became the major cause of the Syrian civil war. Well, we know it wasn't really a civil war. It was an attempt at regime change using these various jihadi groups by the United States. And it's clearly escalating. And we now have warplanes from at least 6 countries in Syria's airspace, including those of the American and Russian superpowers. Now, 5 terrorist groups have banded together, at least in terms of command and control, and they've created a joint command center in East Ghouta. This is coming from the Russian Ministry of Defense. And this is despite the UN's adoption of a resolution on a 30-day ceasefire in Syria, which sounds really good until you find out that everybody is hemming and hawing about it. Apparently, Turkey is saying that this UN ceasefire does not constrain their operations against the Kurds, and Putin is already saying that it doesn't constrain attacks on the terrorist groups. So it's going to be kind of hard to say that there is a ceasefire, but they are trying to get more humanitarian aid in there. Story coming on out of Sputnik News yet again. Syrian media has caught U.S. helicopters transporting Daesh terrorists to a Syrian training camp, proving that the U.S. is still using these terrorists as proxies here. Another story out of Sputnik News, regime change propaganda on Syria now in overdrive. The U.S. has dropped this pretense we're there to get the terrorists, and they're going on back, oh, we got to get Assad, he's terrible, he's going to use more poison gas on his people. Story out of TASS is saying militants in eastern Ghouta prepare provocation involving chemical weapons. This is coming from top brass, and it may have already happened earlier today. Same thing they tried before. And again, where this story breaks down, what reason does Assad have to use a chemical weapon knowing it is exactly what the United States wants him to do so that they can escalate the war? Now, as you know, the Turkish army attacked a convoy in Afrin. The Kurds are saying that it was full of food and medical materials and medical aid, as well as civilians being evacuated from the areas Turkey is already pushing into. Now, Turkey is insisting that the entire convoy was full of terrorists and so forth and so on. So everybody's pointing fingers. But basically, Turkey has invaded Syria, and they've gained control of a border strip inside Syria's Afrin. And they're sending more special forces to escalate the fighting there. Yeah, those experts are right. This could be the opening salvo of World War III. Now, a little bit of good news. Earlier today, Israel fired 5 missiles at Syria, targeting the Dumar Air Base, northwest of East Ghouta. All 5 of the missiles were shot down by the Syrian Air Force. Not one of them got through. Now, there's another article over here. This came out of UNS.com. Basically talking about how reckless it is to escalate the war in Syria. At the same time, very clearly, they're trying to ramp up and justify an attack on North Korea. And they're pointing out, we're running out of materials. In Afghanistan, Trump ordered a doubling of bombing against Taliban forces battling the U.S. occupation. And now the U.S. is actually starting to run low on bombs, guided munitions, and even air-to-air missiles. And apparently they're actually starting to strip some of these supplies from right here in the U.S. Pacific Command and send them to the Mideast. So, even worse, the U.S. is running out of Muslim targets to bomb. ISIS has vanished into thin air. And U.S. air attacks in Syria are being minimized for fear of clashing with Russia. And Iran still remains on the U.S. we got to make wars on the sky list. They still want to get into Iran. If Damascus falls to the U.S., Iran will be next. So getting on over to Korea, article out of shtfplan.com, sanctions, rhetoric, and possible boarding of vessels versus North Korea. And basically it's saying that back on the 23rd, the Trump administration announced the implementation of even stronger sanctions against North Korea to force it into compliance regarding its nuclear weapons. And basically the measures target 27 shipping companies, 28 individual vessels registered in North Korea, and 6 other countries, including China. Now, the U.S. government is claiming that these shipping firms are part of a sophisticated campaign to help North Korea evade UN sanctions, restricting imports of refined fuel and exports of coal. They're trying to strangle the country is what they're trying to do. And then Trump came out with this very scary statement. If the sanctions don't work, we will have to go to phase 2, and phase 2 may be a very rough thing, may be very, very unfortunate for the world. So it sounds like he's actually threatening the whole world. If North Korea does not disarm, we're just going to make war on everybody. And I would like to remind the U.S. government that boarding another nation's ships in international waters without their permission constitutes piracy under maritime law. Now, Trump is out there saying that China is helping the U.S. deal with North Korea. Russia is behaving badly. Well, that may be over. China has slammed these new unilateral U.S. sanctions on North Korea. These haven't been approved by the United Nations. This is just the U.S. effectively declaring what amounts to a naval blockade. And it looks like China is probably going to go ahead and keep supporting North Korea all they can. North Korea is warning that Washington is running amok and says, yes, they're concerned about the dark cloud of war, as we all should be. This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't a movie. It isn't a TV show. This is real. We are really going into a world war and all that that entails. Now, over in Lebanon, U.S. envoy David Satterfield has left Beirut for Geneva, did not make any breakthroughs trying to resolve the border dispute between Lebanon and Israel. And basically, President Michel Aoun warned the Jewish state of tragic consequences if it encroached on Lebanese land and sea boundaries, which Israel's already kind of done. It's another potential flashpoint for major war. Now, the good news out of Israel is Netanyahu may be in deeper legal peril. More Israeli officials are arrested on corruption charges. Apparently, 7 Israelis were arrested on Sunday in what the police call Case 4000. This is a new investigation in which members of Netanyahu's innermost circle are suspected of intervening with regulators to help the Bezek Group, an Israeli communications giant, in exchange for favorable coverage of Netanyahu and his wife. And Netanyahu has not been named as an official suspect in the case, but apparently numerous news outlets reported yesterday he's expected to be questioned under caution, a term used for suspects in criminal cases. Now, Israel has just authorized the construction of 350 more illegal settler units in the occupied West Bank. And apparently the Church of the Nativity is now closed in protest over some bureaucratic tiff with the local Israeli government here. Let's see. Getting on back to Korea, this one was out of order. North Korea is being depicted by the Western media as a dangerous rogue state, plotting the nuclear holocaust of America, blah, 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 blah. We heard exactly the same thing about Iraq. We've been hearing the same thing about Iran. We've been hearing it about Syria, about any country the U.S. wants to invade. It's the same pattern over and over. The corporate media's job is to get you to hate the designated enemy enough to be willing to fling your babies onto their bayonets. That's what their job is. Ron Paul, who's the voice of reason, is out there saying, we can't continue to run the world. And he's absolutely right. This government can't even run this country and make it work. All right, let's talk about some of the economic news now. Article out of the Burning Platform. It's titled Goldilocks is Dead, which is a whimsical reference to a childhood fairy tale. But it's basically saying that every president seems to fall into the same pattern of false economic narratives once they take office. And yes, we're seeing it again. We're seeing Trump is just going along with rigging the stock market and using it as a political banner. And fibbing the jobs numbers, fibbing the rates of inflation. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Dan in British Columbia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I just happened to be on Twitter the other night, and this whole lockout thing that you were talking about, and I think some people were trying to say it had to do with Russian bots, whatever Twitter's excuse was. But I happened to be on Twitter at the time, and I've been on it for quite a number of years. I've never seen anything like it. Every second or third tweet and retweet and another tweet on top of that was about this David Hogg guy being an actor, and this Alexa Mednick student saying that she saw the shooter and heard shots coming from another part of the building. These kind of tweets were going around, and then all of a sudden Mark Rubio tweeted that he said something about it being, disgusting, people spreading false rumors about second shooters and David Hogg being an actor. And all of a sudden, all these tweets were unavailable. And that cartoonist Ben Garrison?
Yes.
He tweeted out that he lost more than 2,000 subs, just like that. And I lost about a third. Only had about 500 people following because my original page got deleted, just like my YouTube accounts all the time. But I just wanted to weigh in that it had nothing to do with Russian bots or anything. They were just really afraid of this narrative getting out. And Alex Jones has talked about it. They're trying to get rid of him. And if they do, people are just going to be more interested. So they can't get rid of Alex Jones, even though, sometimes I don't know who he's working for, but I just wanted to weigh in on that.
Well, you raise a very good point. I mean, we're all seeing the government and the corporate media do this. And over at our online store, we actually sell a coffee mug that says the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force it to act like one where everybody can see it. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Everything that they do to control the story from now on is only going to make matters worse. You heard that other caller. YouTube has shot itself in the foot. The more they ban, the more they block, the more people are going to say, I'm out of here. Because America is now awake. And we understand what's been going on and how badly we've been lied to. By the way, I've heard a rumor that they're planning on renaming the AR-15 to the Rubio because they're both so easy to buy.
Oh my God, yeah. And okay, this David Hogg character, this guy, I think they sort of prepped him and primed him. I know his mother's working for CNN and his father is the ex-FBI, is supposed to be like Air Force intelligence ex-guy. Or so. I don't know anything more than that. But this kid is like, I don't know where he thinks he lives, but he's trying to, take away your rights, your Second Amendment rights, which I think protect the First Amendment rights. I mean, we don't have free speech here in Canada. We don't have the ability to defend our family. If someone breaks in and wants to, kill me and my wife and my baby, then they're going to go ahead and do it, and the cops will show up and put some yellow tape up. That's all I get.
Yes, you're absolutely right here. That Second Amendment is what gives the other 9 amendments in the Bill of Rights their teeth.
Yeah, so, I don't know. I know these false flag shootings and mass shootings are starting to get, boring. Like we're giving so many of them that we're just, a week later, everyone forgets about this one. This one, I think, is definitely special. People need to stick with this one. Don't drop. Keep spreading all the second shooters and what the guy was wearing and the fact that he showed up at McDonald's and he was arrested. He wasn't dripping in sweat when he was arrested, which is interesting. You'd think if you're wearing full body armor and you're running around trying to escape,
yeah,
that you
he should have been drenched in
sweat. Yeah. So all these questions. Anyways, I'll let you go.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the economic news. Apparently, over at Goldman, they're concerned that if the yield on the 10-year bonds hits 4.5%, that could trigger a 25% market crash. And apparently there's like a cottage industry of people out there predicting when the 10-year yield will cause a market crash. Apparently last Friday, both Tom Lee and Jeff Gundlach chimed in with their latest forecasts. So everybody is now out there saying, yes, there's something major getting ready to happen, and it's going to be bad. Now, over in Latvia, there's been a major bank run at ABLV. That's Latvia's third largest bank. And they got an emergency central bank loan, and they suspended withdrawals. And now people are concerned because apparently there are a large number of banks worldwide that are on the edge of insolvency. And they could all collapse together, which means we get to start a new economy based on value and not debt. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And if you really want to be a pirate, join the U.S. Navy and start boarding those North Korean ships, because that is considered piracy under maritime law. We're talking about the economy, and we have talked many times about how the true scale of joblessness in this country is being hidden. That they come up with that number, that's the number of people who've lost their jobs in the last week or so. And behind them are some 90 million legal American citizens willing and able to work, and they can't find jobs. And so there is this article that came out of Zero Hedge that says millions of working age men will never return to the labor market, according to the Federal Reserve. And what they're talking about is a phenomenon called job polarization. And what that means is because technology and science is advancing so fast, once somebody is out of the job market for a certain period of time, they no longer have the skills needed to find a new job. Well, that also applies to those millions and millions of illegal immigrants and refugees who are coming into this highly technological society. They don't have the job skills. They're just loading on to the social safety net and being encouraged to vote Democratic, of course. But it is a major problem. Now, David Morgan is out there saying that maybe the time has come for silver to return to the monetary system. I couldn't agree more. You will never get it past the current Federal Reserve, but it's something that we need to consider after this government is through thrashing around in its death throes and possibly risking the rest of the world in the process. But yeah, go back to a unit of currency that is based on commodity, something that exists in ample enough supply where it can't be monopolized and manipulated. And there was, back in, I think it was the 80s, a big scandal about these two brothers that tried to basically monopolize the silver market. It was a big stink about that. But yeah, this system based on debt is not sustainable. It never really was. The people who set up the Federal Reserve knew that somewhere down the road it would all fall apart, but they didn't care because they'd be long dead by then, after their lives of wealth and comfort and privilege. By the way, there's been a massive surge in the delinquency rate on credit card loans. There's a lot of delinquency out there. Missed payments. Everybody's running out of money. Now, as you know, Venezuela has just launched the petro. This is a currency based on Venezuela's oil revenue. That's what it's backing it up. The petro represents so much of crude oil. And apparently, in just 2 days, Venezuela sold $1 billion worth, more than $1 billion worth. Almost 1 million people have visited the petro website since the currency's launch just 2 days ago. So they're going like gangbusters, and possibly as a result of that, Democratic Senator Robert Menendez is out there saying that we've got to crush the petro cryptocurrency and use sanctions. How dare they use a currency other than the US dollar? That's simply not done, according to the rules we just made up. We've talked before about Wells Fargo, and they have not exactly had the best of names. Actually, none of these banks' reputations are doing very well these days. But apparently, if you remember, second half of last year, there was this situation where auto loan customers were sold insurance policies they didn't need. And that was a requirement. For the auto loan, you will buy auto insurance from us. Even if they already had adequate auto insurance, that's what was done. And some of these people, because of the added cost of a second car insurance policy they didn't really need, they got short and their cars got repossessed. Well, apparently, Wells Fargo has goofed again. They sent out letters about the auto insurance scam containing erroneous information. And it's just a huge amount of egg on their face. Meanwhile, Wells Fargo has launched a new commercial TV campaign claiming they're looking out for their customers. No, they aren't. They're looking out for themselves. That's what bankers always do. Now, as you know, Europe is dealing with its refugee crisis and the growing awareness that a lot of these military-age men who are coming across the borders are jihadis, or they've fought with the jihadis and they've come back with a really bad attitude. But a report from Frontex, which is the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, is now finding that women and children returning from the war zones are an increasingly difficult threat to assess for security services across the continent. They've got female jihadis to worry about now. So thank you, George Soros, for that. Now, speaking of borders, because of the conditions in Venezuela, a lot of Venezuelans are trying to leave the country. And so Colombia and Brazil have announced strict border controls. They used to have a very loosey-goosey, relaxed, you can go around with these migration cards. And they're going to stop issuing those. And only those with valid passports or existing migratory cards will be allowed to pass the borders. They're concerned about a flood of refugees, and they have every right to be. Now, over in Oakland, the mayor basically tipped off all the illegal immigrants that there was going to be ICE raids within the next 24 hours. And, of course, the mayor is out there saying that he was ethically bound to do this. Actually, no. You're ethically bound to follow the law. And tipping off these illegal immigrants, that could be construed as obstruction of justice. It's certainly a Title VIII violation for assisting the illegal immigrants to evade the Immigration Customs Enforcement officers. But they're loading up all these states with all these illegal immigrants, and then they're getting them to vote Democratic. Last week we had that story about how one of these mayors is issuing a city ID, which will be declared as valid for registering to vote and to vote with, forgetting, of course, that undocumented workers are not allowed to vote. Only legal American citizens are allowed to vote. This thing is wide open. the Democrats are going to steal Congress this November unless Donald Trump starts clamping down on some of this stuff. That means the second 2 years of his one and only campaign, he'll be completely hamstrung. The Democrats won't let him accomplish anything as part of the campaign for 2020, where they'll say, look, he didn't do anything. Trump was just a big old goof. He didn't do anything. All right, let's take a phone call from Charlie in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, he did one thing. He did ban bump stocks, Mike. Hey, these shootings, like this last one here, this is a big push to elect women into the Congress. And once they get enough women in there, they will vote to ban more than just the AR-15 and the AK. Women will go that route. Now, whether we're going to obey the law or not, but this is preparing the voters for November. And so this is why this big propaganda campaign is coming out of the media on this thing. And if this thing's fake, and if any of these things are going to come unwound, it's going to happen in Broward County, because half that county is full of people from New York that are the grandchildren from organized crime. We know about organized crime. It's greedy and it's very jealous. And so if something's going to blow up here, I think it'll blow up in this Broward County thing. So thank you for taking my call.
Oh, I certainly hope so. I mean, at some point, the government is clearly making mistakes. They're not planning these things out. They've lost control of the narrative. The American people don't trust them any longer. They're very skeptical, and that's a very good and healthy thing. And yeah, at some point, something's going to come on out where the government will collapse, and it could very well be the details of the Uranium One deal. It could be the details of the Clinton Foundation. It could be the fact that Hillary Clinton, while she was Secretary of State, was running an espionage operation, selling U.S. secrets to interested foreigners using her email server to deliver, and the Clinton Foundation to collect and launder the money. But something's going to come on out where the American people are just going to have that palm-to-forehead moment and say, this has got to stop. This is it. We can't live like this anymore. And again, I am not encouraging violence of any kind, but I am encouraging awareness and education, and that it's okay to be very angry about what's being done to us all by these money junkies and war hawks. Anyway. Now then, there's an organization out there, and they're called Veterans for Child Rescue. And apparently they and their covert Viper Team 12 conducted a coordinated operation up in Utah called Operation Blue M&M, and basically arrested 7 people for pedophilia. And I think this is a great thing here. Now, among the pedophiles arrested were Jason Livermore, a married U.S. Army recruiter with 2 children, Carlos Venezuela Nunes, an undocumented alien, and Floyd Jennings, a school bus driver and grandfather. Felony charges ranged from conspiracy to commit child rape, rape of a child, aggravated kidnapping, to dealing harmful materials to minors. Well, good. There's a little bit of good news coming on out here. And again, there may be a link between this apparent surge in this aberrant behavior and prescription antidepressants. Because one of the things the SSRIs do, they wreck your impulse control. So you're walking along, you're seeing a little tiny kid, and for whatever reason, the wiring in your brain says, that's interesting, and you're just going to go for it. Now, here's an example of how political correctness has really run out of control. Because there was this transgender boy who claims he's a girl, and he was allowed to compete in the girls' wrestling team. And it's Mac Beggs, and he won the state title. This is down in Texas. He won the state title. Well, of course. Doesn't matter what he thinks he is in his head. He's got the body of a male, got the greater muscle mass, the testosterone. He's not really a girl. And by saying that just because he imagines he's a girl or something in between, that he can compete with the girls. That's not fair to the girls. There's a reason that there are men's and women's division in athletics, because it is a fact of life that men, on average, are larger and stronger than women. And allowing this transgender wrestler to compete in the girls, of course he won the state wrestling title. He's got the muscles to do it. And I can imagine those girls must be very upset and angry and frustrated, along with their parents. I would not be surprised if a lot of them dropped out of the sport completely, because they know they're never going to be able to compete against this guy, and that's what he is. Forget about all the hormone treatments and the surgery and all the rest of it. You test his DNA, yep, that's a guy. Same thing with Caitlyn Jenner. Doesn't matter what he looks like, genetically he is male. And as we reported last week, a lot of this transgender nonsense is being encouraged and sponsored by the medical industrial complex, which wants to sell hormone treatments and sex reassignment surgery and all this other nonsense. Late breaking news from Florida. Apparently, the Broward sheriff, Scott Israel, is refusing to resign. The good news is the Florida Attorney General is saying that he is now under investigation for what the heck went wrong down there. More political correct nonsense here. And we did mention this briefly last week, but I want to go into it in a little more detail. Over at Yale University, which used to be one of America's most prestigious Ivy League institutions, they're now offering a course this semester to guide students through examination of the construction and counter-narratives around whiteness. And this was reported by thecollegefix.com. The goal of the new course is to help students understand and counteract whiteness, exploring such topics as white imagination, white property, and white speech. Now, can you imagine the outcry if somebody said, we're offering a college course on how to counteract blackness in society, or brownness, or Jewishness? There would be a huge uproar. But all of a sudden, it's politically correct to discriminate against white people. Now, racism is wrong. Regardless of which direction it's going, racism is wrong. And that's what Yale University is preaching. It's okay to be racist against white people. They deserve it. They're evil people. If this gets out of control, we're going to wind up like places in South Africa and Zimbabwe, where they just grab all the property of the white people, give it to black people, or whoever, and watch the entire country implode. That's what happened in Zimbabwe. They took these farms away from families who'd been owning those farms for generations, and they handed them out to black people who didn't actually know how to operate a farm. And so the harvest collapsed, and that's how Zimbabwe wound up with currency that was worthless. They were walking around with bills, $100 billion. So, or was it $1 trillion? I think it was $1 trillion. Still have some of those things here. Yeah. No, this is $10 billion. So anyway, so South Africa's gone the same direction, and I predict the same outcome there as well. Now, when we come on back here, there's a story, actually two, that actually link back to that movie, Atomic Homefront. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And at the top of the program, I did a shout out about this HBO documentary, Atomic Homefront. And just to recap on that a bit, it's telling the story of these suburban communities just to the northwest of St. Louis, Missouri. And apparently there was a company in St. Louis was involved in the purification of the uranium for the atomic bomb during World War II, and they generated tons and tons and tons of highly radioactive waste that were simply dumped on an empty lot and allowed to basically wash into this stream, Coldwater Creek, I think it's called. And unfortunately, those homes around that creek, that is a natural floodplain. And so over the years, there have been many cases where the creek will overflow its boundaries, and this water and the sludge literally wound up inside the homes and on the lawns of all this property. And nobody knew it was there. There was no requirement for real estate agents to even mention that these homes that these people were buying were just down the road from a Superfund radioactive site. But it appears that this is not an isolated occurrence. We certainly know that Hanford is a mess, and they're not dealing with that. There was the big Love Canal scandal that did result in the Superfund law being passed, and it's referred to briefly in Atomic Homefront. But apparently, out here in California, their Attorney General has charged 5 former and current employees of the Panoche Water District in Central California with felonies, including using public funds for personal items and illegally burying barrels of hazardous waste. And apparently, California's version of the EPA found 86 drums, each holding between 35 and 55 gallons of chlorine, caustic soda, iron chloride, and a mixture of used antifreeze, used solvents, and used oil. All of that stuff is very toxic. So it's an issue. It's definitely an issue. They're still dumping radioactive water from Fukushima into the ocean. Remember that we had this engineer who worked on the fracking wells called into the show when fracking first became controversial and said that the fracking drilling companies were making deals with various corporations to basically pump their toxic waste down into the ground. And they were saying, great solution. It'll stay there. It'll never come up. And of course it has. Apparently there is a Norwegian mining site in the Amazon in Brazil, and following some very heavy rains, dumped toxic waste into waterways and soil around the metropolitan area of Paris' capital, Belém. And there was the Aaron Brockovich story. And like I said, you got to see that Atomic Homefront. You will be disturbed by it, at how these families who are dealing with cancer, how they're just universally treated with disdain and contempt at all levels of government. We'll be right back for hour number 3. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3 here. And before we take these phone calls, I got an email following up on the Alex Jones story, which includes the recording and a transcript. And I want to read it to you. Please listen very carefully. This is what Alex actually said. It was just a stand down, and men running around in camo shooting guns while the police stand down. There's dozens of students saying, oh, there was guys running around in camo. And then he says, hell, did Islamists attack? He poses it as a question. It's not saying that's what actually happened. And then he goes on to mention that the sheriff is an Islamist, or at least supportive of them. In fact, one of the ironies to come out of this case is the sheriff was opposed to concealed carry in the schools, but went ahead and said it was okay for a local mosque. So Alex Jones, to be fair and honest, he posed it as a question, and sometimes he tries to go for the more sensationalistic kind of stuff. But I can't say that this is where Alex Jones is trying to blame the Parkland shooting on Islamists. He just went with the fact that the sheriff is reportedly Islamist and went from there. All right, let's take some phone calls from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm going to step back a little bit on Donald Trump. Correct me if I'm wrong. During the campaign run for presidency, did he not discover some bugs that he was wired in the Trump Towers? Did he not reveal that he found out he was being bugged?
Yes, he did, and he even mentioned it during the campaign, and of course the media said, oh, you're just being paranoid and silly. Now we know that, yes, in point of fact, it was happening.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, that's not been brought up much more. I mean, with the GOP memo, I mean, the whole investigation and this whole collusion thing and everything prior to that, I mean, he was correct in saying that he was bugged, and directly, which would have been under the direction of Barack Obama to place these wiretaps on him, which is a big-time Fourth Amendment violation. And I don't understand why nothing is being done about that in the past. I'm amazed that this is just forgotten, this whole thing.
Well, the reason it's being forgotten is they're hoping that we're going to forget it. And the reason nothing is being done about any of these scandals is that we have this narcocracy that is worried for its very survival right now. And they've just closed ranks, and they're just going to stand there and just say, well, we choose not to do anything about it, and you're just going to have to accept that, which, unfortunately, more and more Americans are starting to say, no, we don't, and that's a danger sign right there.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I'm just saying that Obama did order these wiretaps. It was illegal, and he didn't even have to go to the FISA court on this. I think he did this on his own, correct? Without going to the FISA courts?
Don't exactly know. Until there's actually an open investigation, we don't exactly know the chain of command on this. But yes, it had to go up to Obama, and then it filtered down through various other functionaries. But I've been saying all along, this is the Democrats' version of Watergate, and that's why they're so afraid of it. It took the Republican Party years to recover from Richard Nixon, and the Democrats don't want to have to go through that.
I agree. This is probably 10 times worse than Watergate. Much bigger. Much bigger.
Much bigger.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha.
I tell you what. As far as that the scenario in the math class about someone misconstruing a square root emblem as looking like a firearm, and then all of a sudden law enforcement starts keying in on what was going on with that. What are they supposed to use for an emblem for that type of math equation?
They're supposed to use the square root sign. But right now, everybody's being conditioned to see guns everywhere. And the kid who said it looks like a gun may have been kidding, and the police are now investigating him as to whether he might be a danger.
You know, that tends to give the impression of either you be careful what you say, or do you say anything at all?
Well, again, I think everybody is very much overreacting to all of this. And,
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. But the problem is that, does that mean that everybody should just take and clam up and not say a word if something does actually happen? So it's like a psychological catch-22. Either you do or you don't.
It is a very difficult place to be, and of course the goal of political correctness is to trick us into self-censoring our speech so that we never dissent against what the official story is supposed to be. But obviously we're not going along with that nonsense.
Well, that's true, too. Oh, and by the way, the thing about the one male student that wanted to compete in what sport was it?
It's down in Texas, yes.
I didn't catch the name of the sport, though.
Girls wrestling.
Oh, okay. Ooh, ow. Okay. Simple rule of thought. Until you're out from beneath your parents' house and you're paying your own bills, you are physically what you are. I don't care if you're in school or whatever. If you have a vagina, then you're a woman. If you have a penis, you're a male. Or a man. Boy, whatever the case is. You compete with your same physical gender. You don't compete, just say, oh, I feel like a girl today, or I feel like a man today. Excuse me, that hurts my vocal cords.
Okay.
You know, you don't go and say that and say so we can go and compete in a given sport or whatever. If the schools are not careful, they better be darn well ready to be sued by the parents, let alone the community, for allowing that type of thing to happen. I hate to say that. It probably will never come to fruition, and chances are they probably would be thrown out of court. But, I mean, someone has to draw a line somewhere.
I agree. We're way over the line already with this politically correct nonsense.
Well, the thing is, every time I hear about it, it makes me want to hurl. When I hear, well, this student, she thinks she's a man, and this student thinks that he's a girl. And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. Like I said before, if you're living underneath your parents' roof, guess what? You abide by your parents' guidelines. Until you were able to go out and afford your own way and pay for your own surgery and all that stuff, keep it to yourself and whatever have you. Enough is enough of this stuff.
Well, unfortunately, the latest propaganda from the transgender people is that being the wrong gender in your body is now declared an illness. And they're saying that children have a legal right to treatment regardless of what their parents want. That's how hard they're pushing this thing. So you have all these easily impressionable children who are getting all this nonsense in the schools about transgenderism. And as they start getting into adolescence, they go through the normal trauma, emotional trauma of adolescence, and they think, oh, the problem is I'm actually the opposite gender. And they go on out and they get this stuff done. And of course, this is all being at least partly sponsored by the medical industrial complex, because they're going to make money with the hormone treatments and the surgeries and all the rest of that. And it's just another business opportunity, carving up little kids for a fast buck. And it really is utterly ridiculous. And I mean, they just went way too far with it. And how many different pronouns do we now have for the various genders? It used to be he and she, and now there's like dozens. And you're supposed to know them all. And in some states, they already have laws saying that if you call a transgender person by the wrong pronoun, you can be punished for it. Which, okay, but the person in front of me has to have a hat or something that says, I wish to be addressed as shrunk.
I'd like to see them try to pull that, because, believe me, they'd have a big countersuit on their tail.
Well, they've already pulled it. They've already pulled it in some places. You know, like the guys who can use the girls' bathrooms and everything.
Oh, no. If I had some dude come walking into the gal restroom when I'm in there, let me tell you something. You're either going to hear a bloody curdling scream, or someone's going to get the crap beat out of them and kicked out of the bathroom.
Okay. And at that point, some other guy is going to stand up and say, I self-identify as Chuck Norris, and stomp the heck out of them.
Oh, I forgot to mention, I'd probably call the police as well and say, hey, does this dude have documentation saying that he's actually a gal or whatever? You know, no.
Let's do a DNA test.
Well, that would work too, but I don't think they do DNA tests right there on the spot.
No.
But that person has to have some sort of documentation from a doctor or whatever on them. Otherwise, they're getting the crap beat out of them. They call the police afterwards. So,
I mean, our whole society has become so decadent. We're even way beyond Rome just before the collapse. Future historians are going to look back at what we were doing in this stage of our history, and they're going to say, what was wrong with those people?
I wish it would go ahead and collapse and let it be done with.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said.
I said I wish it would go ahead and collapse and be done with it.
Yeah, me too. Then I can give up all this nonsense and just be Claire's roadie for the rest of my life.
Well, best wishes to her and big hugs. Gentle hugs, excuse me.
Gentle hugs. She's actually better today, and we're just trying to keep it that way. All right, thank you for the phone call, Francis. The phone lines are now open, and we'd like to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Getting on to human-caused global warming. Insert ominous music here. Apparently, Montana just really got hit last week. Kalispell at an all-time record low temperature. Cold temperatures set more records in Bozeman and West Yellowstone. Denver shattered their previous record low temperature. Cold is lingering on here. Apparently over in Cambridge, they're looking at the 5-day forecast of snow and ice and sub-zero temperatures. Apparently up in Sweden, they had a huge icy blast hit that caused all kinds of traffic chaos. Remember back in March 20th of 2000, And the newspapers were out there with the warmistas claim snowfalls are now a thing of the past. And we keep getting record-setting winter after record-setting winter after record-setting winter. And still the corporate media is out there saying, oh yeah, it's really hot out there. It's really, the Arctic ice is melting. It's almost gone. Western Washington, record low temperatures on Friday, a prelude to more snow and rain in Western Washington. I remember when Claire and I were living in Washington, we lived up in the Cascades, and Claire wasn't entirely comfortable with the cold weather, but we did love the scenery, especially the blue ice here. Now, earlier in the show, I was talking about how corporate social media is now engaged in open censorship. Twitter is deleting all tweets that question the official story of Florida. YouTube is doing the same. They've deleted some of my videos. They're probably going to delete this one today because I talked about Parkland. But apparently a group of free speech lawyers have filed a serious legal challenge to Twitter's censorship policies in San Francisco County Court. This happened last week, and they want a ruling preventing Twitter from banning users purely on the basis of their views and political associations. Now, the 29-page complaint contends that under a California legal doctrine that recognizes some private facilities as public forums, Twitter may not discriminate against free speech purely based on viewpoint. Now, of course, Twitter is still out there saying that, no, we're just deleting stuff from the Russian bots. Because ordinary, real Americans, they believe the official story. They believe the government. They're very trusting and naive. All that is said, it's all Russian bots. There's no evidence for that at all. But I hope Twitter and the other social media companies are going to realize they can't do this and survive. Even forget about the lawsuits. Listen to all the calls that we had here today. People are saying, I'm not using Facebook anymore. I'm looking for one of the new up-and-comers. There's a tremendous business opportunity right now for companies that would like to have that kind of wealth that Facebook and Twitter and Google all have. And that is to come up with a Facebook-like video platform that doesn't censor, a search engine that doesn't censor, and a text sharing facility that doesn't censor. And the customers are just going to flow right on over because nobody likes being lied to. Nobody likes being censored. Now, this article caught my eye because of my necessity of having to buy a newer car. This came out of the San Francisco Gate. And it's basically a warning that the car of the future will sell your data. Now, as you know, newer cars have built-in tracking. A lot of it comes from the finance company, but it's in there. And they can basically see where you are, and they can sell that data to marketers. Or even worse, in this article, they're saying that you might see ads pop up on that TV screen in the modern cars. Now, I think that's a bad idea because that whiz-bang technology in the middle of the console, it's already a dangerous distraction. We've got one of those in our rental car, and after I get the car started, I won't even touch it. I don't want to look at it. The only thing I'll do is turn the radio and air conditioning on and off. I wonder how many accidents are attributable to making new cars so gadget-heavy. I certainly don't want any of that stuff on whatever it is that we're going to buy. Backup camera. That would be nice. We're in love with the backup camera here. Now, Chinese researchers are working on a hypersonic commercial aircraft that will go from Beijing to New York in just 2 hours. We're talking right at the edge of space, and it's going to put them ahead of other countries who are not developing the aviation of the future. And of course, the immediate response from the United States was, oh, we can't allow this. China could put bombs on that thing and drop bombs on us. The United States has lost its ability to compete or even progress, and its only remaining strategy is to knock everybody else down to their level. That seems to be what's going on here. Down at Cape Kennedy, you know, that giant rocket launching tower NASA spent $1 billion on it. It's starting to bend. And NASA is saying, well, yeah, there's some deflection, but we don't really need to fix it. We're sure that it will hold together. Where have you heard that song before? All right. Story coming out of government slaves here. States getting ready to block access to natural health care choices and supplements. And we all know why. It's to force us into a dependency on the pharmaceutical industry and doctors and pharmacies and extract the money, which might be acceptable to an extent, except for what's coming out of the commercial pharmaceutical industry is proving to be so harmful. And again, watch those glitzy, expensive TV commercials for prescription medication and actually listen to that voice at the end. They're pushing dangerous products. And the reason they do that is really very simple. In order to get a patent, in order to get market exclusivity, the pharmaceutical companies are focused totally on coming up with brand new chemicals that have never existed before. When you get a cure that's from something natural, that's all biochemistry that we have co-evolved with over billions of years. And you don't get nasty surprises from it. But the money junkies in charge of the pharmaceuticals don't care. They just want you to be constantly, chronically ill and be forced to come to them for a treatment of the symptoms. Nobody's after cures. Cures are a bad business model for the medical industrial complex. They just want you made just sick enough where you'll come in and give them more of your money. And yeah, that's why these politicians at these states who would sell their own mother for $1 are going to say, yes, we're going to ban all of that stuff here because it's cutting into the profits of our top campaign contributors. All right, we got to take a break for some commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And somebody sent me an interesting statistic, and that is more people drown in their bathtubs than are killed by assault weapons. Ban bathtubs, okay, if you want to do that. Somebody sent me another story about swing set negligence. There was a big lawsuit. Well, we got to ban swing sets. They serve no useful purpose. Same thing with baseball. More people are murdered with baseball bats than with assault weapons. Let's ban baseball. Anyway, getting on back to some of the news here. Another article about this. YouTube has gone full-blown 1984 over the Parkland PSYOP, free speech under attack like never before on the internet. Like I said, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is you force them to act like one where everybody can see it. So, getting into some more news here. One of the tragic stories coming out of Parkland is that this 18-year-old Florida shooting survivor still has shrapnel in her face, so she's going to be carrying that for the rest of her life. All for a political agenda here. Another story out of government slaves here. The U.S. Army is making lethal viruses, bacteria, and toxins. This is a blatant violation of the United Nations Convention. See, a while back, all the nations got together and said, you know, these weapons are very dangerous. We should destroy them and get rid of them. And they all agreed to do so. And most did. The United States did not. Remember the anthrax that was being sent to media and politicians right after 9/11? And it was in envelopes and letters that were written to look like they were from semi-literate Muslims. And it turned out the anthrax itself had come from a U.S. government laboratory. It was weaponized anthrax. Okay, looks like the fight is on here. Several states have begun the process of having assault weapons banned outright from being sold and deemed illegal to own. Now, I don't know how that's going to affect the 80% sales as well. But again, notice the focus on assault weapons. It's always the assault weapons. Nobody but these staged school shooters are using these weapons because those are the ones the government is after, because those are the ones in the hands of an enraged American people would offer the most resistance. Real criminals use small concealable guns. You've never seen anybody walk into a convenience store with an AR-15 to rob it. Wouldn't make any sense. You'd be seen coming and going. Only these mass shooters are given these weapons, the weapons the government wants to demonize. And we should resist with all that we can. By the way, apparently the NRA is all of a sudden getting a whole bunch of new members who apparently agree with the NRA that these companies that drop their support are behaving like cowards. So I think that's a really good thing about that. We've been following this story along for a long time. Since the year 2015, 77 holistic practitioners have died under curious circumstances, and of course, the corporate media ignores them. A lot of them were tied up with this negalase and GC-MAF. Now, GC-MAF is a substance normally produced by your body from using vitamin D that is one of the most potent self-healers that your body has. It can actually cause cancer to go into remission. And by the way, 25% of all cancers spontaneously go into remission. But the medical industrial complex's attitude is, well, we don't know which 25%, so we're going to treat them all. And we just had one of Claire's choir singers diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and it's already into her brain. So it's a touchy suspect. But again, negalase has been found in vaccines, and there's no legitimate medical reason for it to be there. But what it does do is destroy the GC-MAF in your body, which raises the ugly specter of somebody somewhere in the medical industrial complex wanting more people to get cancer to make more money. If we were all healthy, the entire medical profession would collapse overnight. We are allowed to take care of our own health, to eat healthy. We're not allowed to do that anymore. If you want to eat healthy, it's declared a mental illness, orthorexia nervosa. When I was young, I never expected to see this country get this bad. When I first got blacklisted over the Vince Foster murder, I knew the country was headed in a bad direction. But it has gotten really so bad. And I agree with this other caller. I'm ready for the collapse to happen right now. Maybe after I get my car. So we'll do that. Apparently, an ex-opioid addict has started an online campaign against the billionaire family behind OxyContin. And the company has Purdue Pharmaceuticals has made billions off of opioids. And they've been pushing them. They've been encouraging. And now, of course, we've got a crisis because they've got a tremendous source of opium in Afghanistan. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we just got a little clarification on the story about the wrestlers down in Texas. Apparently, the issue is it's actually a female transitioning to be a male, but she's already taking the steroids and the hormone treatments, and that's why everybody is crying foul. And I'm in agreement with that. I mean, there's a strict no doping policy for the Olympics. Apparently 2 Russians have tested positive for drugs that they might have been planted on them. All the skullduggery. But that's what's going on. You know, it's insane. All right, let's take a phone call. Larry in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Mike, it's probably Terry from California. I know you don't waste your time watching 60 Minutes, but last night the first story was presented like it was breaking news, and they had these airplanes coming in Syria. They were shooting these rockets down, and they're showing this helicopter. And then they went into this village that was mostly, they mostly showed kids, and they said they were gassed by sarin gas. And, toddlers and some, teenagers, and showing them all dead there. And then they interviewed this guy from the UN saying, you know, it was Assad. And there wasn't any question about it. It was certainly him, you know, they could tell. And then later on, I discovered that was a rerun from about a year ago. So what they're doing, they're just trying to do whatever they have to do to get back in Syria. And there's people that believe it, you know.
And I think the problem is people aren't believing it. The American people were weary of war. It's been, going on 20 years almost. And the U.S. has stuck its nose into 3/4 of the nations on planet Earth under flimsy excuses. And we all know that that's what's going on here. And I'm pretty sure that at some point when the war gets really big, they're going to try and bring back the draft. And at that point, I think we're going to see the American people finally wake up the way they did during Vietnam. President Johnson wrote in his memoirs that when he looked out of the Oval Office and saw 1 million people out there on that Central Mall, that's the day that he knew Vietnam was lost.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get my ticket for Woodstock now, you know, so I can get it a little cheaper. But anyway, let me ask you a question. Did we have a caller call earlier that said there's a bill in Congress to waive the 2/3 ratification for the states if they want to change one of the amendments of the Constitution?
The federal government can't change the state constitutions. The states' legislatures.
No, I mean the federal government, the federal Constitution. I mean the U.S. Congress.
Okay, it presently takes 3/4 of the states to ratify, and what consists of a ratified bill varies from state to state. For some people, some it's a simple majority, then signed by the governor of the state. We can see where this is heading. They want that Second Amendment gone to turn us all back into slaves. And we have to resist this as much as we can. Got to join the NRA. Got to get a weapon while they're still available or learn how to make them. This is scary times. As we reported before, if you go back over the entire history of the 20th century, every population targeted for genocide was first stripped of their ability to defend themselves. And look at all the anti-white propaganda that's going on in this country right now. All over the media, Yale University. We're being set up for a civil war in which the white people are going to be exterminated.
Well, that's what they want. They want one group against the other. So we got chaos will come, and they can call in the troops for martial law, and from then on, it's whatever they want. You know, then they strip every house of a weapon. You know, once they do that, like they did during Katrina down in New Orleans, and after that, you know, it's dictatorship, just like Soviet Union.
Well, we're pretty close to that right now, but I also think we're close to a Soviet Union-style collapse.
Yeah, so do I, but majority of people don't even know it. You know, they look at these government statistics, and they're showing good stuff like stock market's going back now, going back up now, above 25,000 for the Dow. And so people don't really know. They're too busy working, trying to make a living. Okay, Mike, that's the only point I wanted to make. I'll let you go to get to the next caller, and I'll stand by and listen.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call here. This is reality time. This isn't abstract. It's not academic. This is real. This is how liberty dies. Over at CNN, apparently, this debate about allowing concealed carry in the schools. And it hit this real nadir where this CNN analyst was out there saying, women can't carry guns anyway because they wear skirts and dresses. And I imagine probably he's going to get accused of sexism on that. And even so, I mean, if you've ever gotten any gun magazines, and I don't know why, but I get them. They're basically catalogs and stuff. And they have all these little belt pouches and even purses with hidden compartments. And they're trying to get away from the idea that the solution to the problem is to arm the victims. But that's the only solution that's going to work. There's a reason all these mass shooters go for those gun-free zones. They can do what they're being paid to do and not have somebody else shoot back. You got to get rid of those. I mean, statistics over the years have shown consistently, when you disarm the population, crime goes up. When you allow the population to be armed, crime goes down. That's why I'm always saying that the anti-gun people are actually pro-crime. They want a safe, working environment for the burglars and the murderers and the rapists. They're such good little people. Now, several years ago, there was actually a city in Georgia, Kennesaw, and they passed a city ordinance requiring every home to have a gun. Their crime rate fell by 80%. Now, you just think about that. Everywhere that guns have been banned, crime and violent crime go up. It happened in Great Britain. It happened in Australia. But this push to totally disarm the law-abiding citizens is simply going to make us all crime victims. And I don't want to be a crime victim. If somebody is trying to break into my home, and I feel that my life and Claire's life are in peril, I have a right to have the means to discourage this person. And it doesn't even mean having to pull the trigger, because years and years and years ago, when I was still living in California, I actually had to chase a burglar out of our home. And all I had to do was put that laser dot on his forehead, and he was gone. Every year in this country, over 1.5 million crimes are thwarted in progress by law-abiding citizens with legal firearms. The police don't thwart crime. They're rarely, if ever, there when the crime is actually happening. They show up afterwards to clean up the mess, to pose with the bodies, and act like they're relevant to the process. I mean, again, look at these Broward cowards. That's what we're going to call them. The Broward cowards, these 4 deputy sheriffs who basically stayed outside while the killing was going on. When seconds matter, the police are just minutes away. Actually, it's about an average of 18 minutes. So at this point, I know that I think this is a false flag attack, and I'm seeing it up all over the independent media, and I guess that's why the independent media has hit the panic button. This one didn't sell. People are buying guns like crazy. They're joining the NRA. And this pathetic ploy of trying to exploit the kids to provoke an emotional response, well, they got one. Seriously ticked me off. This idea that they think we're that easily manipulated. Okay. So, let me read you something real quick about guns. Because I get a lot of emails saying, oh, you're a gun nut. No, I'm not. I was raised with guns. Where I grew up, you got your first gun at age 12, your 12th birthday. And you got the lecture on handling it responsibly and gun safety. And if you ever dared mishandle that gun, you would get a trip to the woodshed that would have you eating dinner standing up for at least 2 weeks. And we took our guns to school. We put them in the cloakroom because on our way home from school, we would have to varmint the farm fields, chase the little critters out. And nobody thought anything about it. In all the years I lived in that town, there was only one incident with a gun that was an attempted suicide. And absent the gun, he would have used something else. And we didn't have mass school shootings. Possibly because we weren't getting drugged out of our minds on all this ADHD, SSRI medication. We didn't even call it ADHD back then. We called it, my teacher is boring the heck out of me. So, This is from my page on the right to keep and bear arms. An armed man is a citizen. An unarmed man is a subject. A gun in the hand is better than a cop on the phone. Colt, the original point-and-click interface. Gun control is not about guns, it's about control. If guns are outlawed, can we use swords? There's an interesting question. Again, under United States versus Miller, yes, we can use swords. The military wears swords. They have some very, very good swords. I have a relative who's in the U.S. Navy, magnificent officer's sword. Let's see, if guns cause crime, then pencils cause misspelled words, and spoons cause overeating. Free men do not ask permission to bear arms. That's right. That Constitution basically says we don't have to ask for the permission. And all of these laws they're passing, they do violate the Constitution. This government has wandered away from the Constitution. Remember when Bush called it a blankety-blank piece of paper? Under the Supreme Court ruling Marbury versus Madison, laws repugnant to the Constitution are supposed to be automatically null and void. But they'll get these members of Congress together and they'll put together some legislation and say, yes, we can spy on you. Forget the Fourth Amendment. Forget the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. This government has gone rogue, and it's rather ironic to see the United States attacking all these other countries, declaring them to be rogue nations. It's the U.S. government that's gone rogue. I mean, when I was a kid, they taught gun safety in the schools. You would go on into the classroom, there would be firearms, and you would be taught how to use them. At the bottom of my webpage for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, there's a photo from 1956. Kids being taught to use firearms safely. Back then, military surplus weapons were donated to school shooting clubs. The Boy Scouts had a shooting club. And now they're just out there. They want to grab the guns because they know they've abused us so much that we must be getting angry. And they are afraid. They are very much afraid. And it is the height of hypocrisy that the same government that's out there saying, you guys can't have these weapons, they're shipping weapons of war to war zones all over the globe. They're giving military-style weapons to drug cartels in Mexico. That has to tell you just how bad things have gotten in Washington, D.C. So, apparently, Princeton University has unleashed the so-called identity police to report people for identity incidents. I'm not even sure what that means, but that's what they're doing. And apparently, Princeton University is encouraging students to report problematic experiences based on their identity. So I guess that means gender identity. So now it's being enforced on campus by our country has just gone so decadent. It's just completely decadent, worse than ancient Rome. It really is. Anyway, it really is absurd out there. So getting on back to the right to keep and bear arms, I want to read you a little something that's also on that main page. And by the way, in this page, along with some photos, there are links to the University of Chicago gun control study, which showed as citizens are disarmed, crime goes up. The survey of the San Diego police, same exact thing. The link between genocides and gun control. And then some facts about the Second Amendment, quotes about the Second Amendment, and some quotes by the gun grabbers, which reveal what the agenda really is. Now, there's an article here called Why Carry a Gun? Personally, I don't. I'm too poor to rob and too ugly to rape. But there's this article. It says, why carry a gun? My old grandpa said to me, son, there comes a time in every man's life when he stops busting knuckles and starts busting caps, and usually it's when he becomes too old to take a whooping. I don't carry a gun to kill people. I carry a gun to keep from being killed. If only those teachers at that Parkland High School had been allowed to do the same. Every time there's one of these mass shootings, it's the first question we ask, where is the person who can shoot back? Do you know what the Department of Homeland Security's official recommendation is in a school shooting situation for teachers? Try and stab the shooter with a pair of scissors. I am not joking. That's what they actually say. So we're coming up here on our last commercial break and then the last segment of our program today. So we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And over at NBC, just to hammer out how propagandistic and biased corporate media is, over at NBC, Peter Alexander asked Ivanka Trump if she believed Donald's sexual misconduct accusers. And she replied saying it's pretty inappropriate to ask a question if she believes the accuser's father. Okay, which is a nice soft answer here. But here's the point. Nobody at NBC has ever asked Chelsea Clinton that same question. Now, apparently one of the allegations of sexual misconduct in the book Fire and Fury has already been discredited. And author Michael Wolff was being interviewed, and the moderator asked him about, does this destroy the credibility of the rest of the book? And Michael Wolff basically said, oh, my microphone has stopped working, and he got up and he walked off the set. But the corporate media is falling apart. It's absolutely falling apart, and they're in a panic mode right now. I think one of the reasons that they're still after Trump so hard is he broke their monopoly on the Oval Office. They were absolutely convinced they were going to put Hillary Clinton in as the president, and Donald Trump and we, the American people, took that away from them. And that's why they're upset. They didn't get what they want. But that's not how it's supposed to work in this country. We, the people, we get what we want. And that is a functioning Bill of Rights and the politicians of our choice, not some corporation's lackeys. So as you go on and about and you talk to people, you got to share some of this information with them. They're not going to get it from the corporate media. And you tell them that corporate media is not telling you what you need to know to be making good decisions. But they'd better wake up and pay attention. This is no longer conspiracy theory. We're on the edge of a world war that will, in all probability, go nuclear. And we need to wake up as many people as we can to stand up as a nation and say, no, we're not going along with this. You lied to us about all those other wars. You lied about Saddam's nuclear weapons. You lied about Lusitania not smuggling weapons. You lied about Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. We've had it. It's time to recognize that lying a population into a war is the highest of high crimes and misdemeanors any ruler can commit. So, another article on the same topic, how to disarm a nation, trick the public into begging for it. That appears to be the strategy. I don't see it happening. The only ones I see out there saying disarm, disarm, disarm are the paid crisis actors and the politicians. And everybody else is out there joining the NRA. They're buying or building guns. And I certainly don't hope that we see them being used in the streets of America, but it might give the government a reason to not be abusive to the American people. There's the time for the music. Time for us to end our show. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.